Illmatic. In 1994, a 20-year-old kid from Queensbridge released 10 tracks and basically rewrote what it meant to be a serious rapper. Nas didn't chase easy hooks or radio airplay. He wrote like a novelist compressing an entire neighborhood into verses. Every bar so packed with detail, you can almost see the stairwells and hear the sirens outside. Producers like DJ Premier and Pete Rock built beats that feel like frames from a documentary, dusty and raw with no gimmicks. Each track was handled by a different producer, yet somehow the album never feels disjointed. Every beat serves the same bleak cinematic mood. Critics called the album perfect, and for once the hype was justified. The Source magazine gave it a rare 5 mic rating before the record had even proven itself commercially. At release, sales were modest. It wasn't an immediate commercial hit. Some executives at the label reportedly worried it was too dense, too uncompromising to sell to a mainstream audience hungry for hooks and choruses. But its influence spread through every rapper who picked up a pen after him. Illmatic proved that pure lyricism, without a single major crossover hit, could define an entire genre on its own. Decades later, it's still the benchmark every debut album gets measured against, and almost none of them clear the bar. Entire magazine rankings still place it at or near the top of greatest hip-hop albums ever made, 3 decades after its release. The Chronic. Dr. Dre had just left NWA and had something to prove to the whole world. What he built next didn't just launch his solo career. It launched an entirely new sound. G-Funk took bass lines from P-Funk, added drawling synthesizers, and slowed everything into a smooth, warm, sun-soaked California groove. Nothing else on the radio sounded like it at the time. The tempo itself was almost hypnotic, built for cruising rather than dancing. The album introduced Snoop Dogg to the world and turned West Coast rap into a commercial force that rivaled anything coming out of New York. But here's where the problem comes in. The album glorified violence and gang culture in a way that sparked national outrage, congressional hearings, and moral panic across the country. Parents' groups called for boycotts. Politicians used it as a talking point in speeches about the decline of American culture. And that controversy, instead of burying it, fueled its sales. It went triple platinum and reshaped hip-hop production for the entire next decade, influencing everything from Southern rap to modern trap. Producers as far removed as Atlanta and Houston borrowed its synth-heavy DNA for years afterward. Ready to Die. Christopher Wallace, known as the Notorious B.I.G., turned his own near-death experiences into a debut album structured like the final hours of a man's life. It opens with the moment of his birth and ends with a track called Suicidal Thoughts. In between, he raps about crime, poverty, and paranoia with a calm, almost conversational flow that makes horrifying details sound smooth, almost soothing, a technical skill that took years for other rappers to even attempt to replicate. And here's where things get even heavier. The album's brilliance comes precisely from the brutal honesty with which it portrays the trap of street life, without pretending there's an easy way out. It manages to balance menace with humor, hardcore bars with radio-ready singles, proving a rapper could dominate the underground and the pop charts at the same time. 2 years after its release, Biggie was murdered, and the album's themes, which had felt like storytelling, suddenly started sounding like prophecy. To this day, some fans say they can't listen to the closing track the same way anymore. What once felt like fiction now plays like a warning nobody caught in time. The low-end theory. A Tribe Called Quest took jazz samples, upright bass lines, and laid-back rhymes, and created something completely out of step with the aggressive rhythm dominating rap in 1991. Q-Tip and Phife Dawg traded verses like two jazz musicians trading solos, and the production was stripped down to the essentials: warm, minimal grooves instead of loud, layered noise. The real danger for the group was commercial. Jazz rap wasn't what labels wanted to push, and the album's subtlety meant it never became a massive crossover hit. But its influence outpaced its sales by miles. Every producer who ever chopped a jazz sample owes something to this record, and it opened a lane for conscious, musically adventurous rap that eventually led to entire subgenres built on live instrumentation and boom-bap drums. Even jazz musicians took notice. Bassist Ron Carter appeared on the record himself, an almost unheard-of crossover for the time, lending legitimacy that helped the album age far better than its initial sales numbers suggested it would. It takes a nation of millions to hold us back. Public Enemy didn't want to entertain. They wanted to declare war. This 1988 album sounds like an actual siren going off at full blast. The production, layered with sampled sirens, scratches, and chaotic noise, was so dense the listener felt caught in the middle of a riot. The Bomb Squad, the group's production team, treated every track like a wall of noise engineered for maximum discomfort. Chuck D's booming voice delivered political messages about racism, media manipulation, and black empowerment, while Flavor Flav provided jarring comic relief between bursts of fury. This is where the intensity peaked for the entire decade. No rap album before it had been this loud, this political, or this sonically overwhelming. Rolling Stone would later call it one of the greatest albums ever made in any genre. It proved rap could be a weapon, not just entertainment, and it terrified exactly the people in power it was designed to terrify. Radio stations were hesitant to play it, which only cemented its reputation as something dangerous enough to matter. Enter the Wu-Tang, 36 Chambers. 9 rappers from Staten Island pooled their voices into a chaotic, kung fu movie-obsessed masterpiece, and somehow it worked better than anyone could have predicted. RZA built beats out of grimy piano loops and samples from martial arts films, creating a sound so gritty and cinematic it felt like walking through a crime scene. Each member brought a completely different style, from GZA's cerebral wordplay to Old Dirty Bastard's unpredictable madness, and the chemistry between them was electric. The real danger was structural. 9 strong personalities on one album usually collapses into pure chaos. Instead, it became one of the most sampled, quoted, and imitated records in rap history, launching an entire clan of solo careers that dominated the next 5 years. No group before or since has managed to turn 9 egos into one unstoppable brand. RZA's contractual strategy allowed every member to sign solo deals while still returning to the clan, a business model almost as influential as the music itself. My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. After a public fall from grace, Kanye West disappeared to Hawaii and came back with an album so maximalist it barely seems to belong to a single genre. Orchestral strings, gospel choirs, warped vocal samples, and guest verses from dozens of different artists were stitched together into something closer to a film score than a classic rap album. Every track feels like it's building toward an explosion, and several of them actually deliver one. This is where ambition became the risk. An album this excessive could easily have collapsed under its own weight. Instead, critics called it a masterpiece almost unanimously, and it redefined how big a rap album's scope could be, pushing the artists who followed to think bigger, stranger, and more cinematic with every project. Some critics still call it the moment rap albums stopped being judged only against other rap albums, and started being judged as pure art. To Pimp a Butterfly. Kendrick Lamar built an album out of jazz, funk, and spoken word poetry that reads like a conversation with his own conscience. He confronts fame, survivor's guilt, systemic racism, and his own self-hatred across tracks that shift tempo and tone without warning, refusing to let the listener settle in comfortably anywhere. The real danger of an album this dense was completely alienating casual listeners. Instead, it became a cultural landmark. One of the tracks was adopted as an anthem at protests across the country. Critics called it the most important rap album of the decade, and its jazz-heavy live instrumentation influenced an entire wave of artists trying to make hip-hop feel less like a beat and more like a living, breathing band. Live musicians who played on the record have said the sessions felt more like a jazz recording than a typical rap studio process. The Marshall Mathers LP. Eminem took the shock value of horror movies and turned it into rap lyrics, creating characters, alter egos, and twisted narratives that blurred the line between fiction and confession. His technical ability was undeniable, with dizzying rhyme schemes packed into every line. But the content sparked outrage from parents' groups, politicians, and even the US vice president's wife at the time. This is where controversy became marketing itself. Every attempt to ban or censor the album only made more people curious to hear it. It sold nearly 2 million copies in its first week alone, a number almost no other rap album has matched since. It proved that pure technical skill combined with shock and vulnerability could turn a single artist into the best-selling rapper in history. Even decades later, it remains one of the fastest-selling rap albums of all time, a record that outrage alone could never have created without the songwriting to back it up.